Jacob Marley is dead. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the podcast you are about to listen to.
I saw 3 ships come sailing in on Christmas Day, on Christmas Day. I saw 3 ships come sailing in on Christmas Day in the morning.
So, how were your last couple days of school?
Oh, chaotic. It always
Really?
is. Yeah, because it's, the anticipation of not having to come back to school for 2 weeks really settles in for them, and then they're like, what's the point of anything we're learning this week, because we're going to have to relearn all of it when we come back. Like, high school the week before Christmas is a Wild West.
No, I understand that. We were having a little bit of that last week in 3rd grade, but not much. Actually, it's been really awesome.
Nice.
It was really nice at school, and kids have been doing great. And also, I gotta just say, it has been wonderful I've been able to pass 4 days. I did holiday camps again.
Oh, nice.
And so I was just playing with the kids and
Yeah.
10 minutes before my shift had ended yesterday, I had 10 minutes left, and I could have just stand, because I'm not lazy.
Sure.
I stand. I stand. So I could have just been in the room, maybe just kind of let those 10 minutes go by, and that's that, right? Then 1 or 2 students came over and were like, are we going to go outside again? And it was really cold yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was like, okay, what are we doing here? Okay, let's do it. I said that to myself mentally. I was like, I can take you out for 5 minutes. Let's go outside. And I took just 3 kids. We went outside, went to the playground, played Lava Monster. I did a couple tricks for them, showed them my parkour moves.
Extreme! Parkour!
Which it's not as impressive as I'm making it sound, but not as lame as you are all thinking. So it's a happy medium of reality there. But we were there for 5 minutes, walking down, walked them back up, and we went back inside, and I was then walking away, rested, ready to move on from the school for holiday break, just as I am rested and ready to move on from A Christmas Carol, Mr. John Newman. How you doing, buddy?
I am excellent, James, and I am very excited because today we are getting into what has to be the most requested version of A Christmas Carol here on Jacob Marley is Dead, a podcast where we talk about our lives in the holiday season, but also talk about A Christmas Carol. I am your host, John.
And I'm his sidekick, Jimmy. And yes, we have had dozens, if not dozens, of requests for this episode. Ooh.
When I say that literally this is the version of A Christmas Carol that every single person who I have ever told about this podcast has asked me if we've covered. Like, it's the first thing out of anyone's mouth. Have you done the Muppet Christmas Carol?
This is A Christmas Carol for a generation. For millennials, for young, for elder and younger millennials. This is, for a lot of people, their Christmas Carol. Yeah. We hadn't get into it, but like this is like the Jim Carrey one and stuff like that for a lot of people, like in the 10s. Like, this is a big
I don't think
deal.
The Jim Carrey Christmas Carol is anybody's like their version of Christmas Carol.
We'll let that one slide, because I'm sure there are a few people here saying what, but but this is a big one. This one is a touchstone. This is a moment in the history of A Christmas Carol. There's before and after A Muppet Christmas Carol.
Yeah, it certainly is. I'm also going to I'm gonna drop my spicy hot take here and say that it is a version that benefits from nostalgia somewhat.
And I'm going to be standing here with the shield of accuracy to back your argument of nostalgia by saying that this is one of the best versions of A Christmas Carol. And I would say while it's not the version of A Christmas Carol, as the same way Mickey Mouse's Christmas Carol couldn't be the definitive version of A Christmas Carol. What it is attempting to do, it does better than any other version I've seen trying to attempt to do it.
Yeah, I can give you that. I'm sure we'll talk about that as we get through it. So,
this is so we're going on one where we're swinging. Okay, all right.
Yeah. Listen,
all right,
listen. This film is like a sacred cow for people. This is a like one of those kind of untouchable movies that like literally everyone I've ever talked to about it loves, and I'm willing to get my hands a little bit dirty on this one. We can dig in a little bit and talk about some things.
And look, no movie is flawless. No movie, is perfect. But I would say that I think what this does well and what does right, it does really, really well. Like, it's amazing.
Definitely. So this is, like we said, The Muppet Christmas Carol. It premiered in 1992. It's the first for a lot of things. It is the first Disney-backed Muppet film.
Yep.
Okay. This is before they actually buy Jim Henson Studios, right? But they produce it. It's the first Brian Henson directed Muppet film after his father's death in 1990. Yeah. Which means it's also Steve Whitmire's first film appearance voicing Kermit the Frog.
We'll have more to talk about that in a little bit. I'm just going to leave it at that, and we're going to move on.
Yeah. So originally, this idea was it was brought to Brian Henson as a possibility for like a way to move the franchise forward. They pitched it to ABC originally as a TV movie, and once the script was brought in, Disney actually looked at it and was like, hey, we can buy this as a theatrical release if you want. Like, there's no reason why this should just be on TV.
I think it's an accurate assessment of the script. I mean, this has enough weight. There's enough meat on the bone here to get a movie out of this.
Yeah, I would also say, like, it's probably the best of the 90s Muppet movies.
Well, this was a hit. I don't know if in theaters it was a hit, but it definitely was a hit on VHS.
Yeah.
And that started the trend that went into Muppets Treasure Island. And then eventually, like, I think the last one was like Muppet Wizard of Oz was like the dumpster fire finale of this.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. Muppets in Space was in the middle there somewhere.
Muppets in Space was, again, I haven't looked at the data, but just as a kid, while Muppets Treasure Island has its fans, it wasn't as big as this.
Yeah,
so they were like, okay, Muppets are big, but maybe it was just,
maybe Muppet classic literature was like a flash in the pan, not necessarily something we continue.
So let's try just a straight up Muppet movie, which, John, I don't know what format we can review Muppets from Space, but can we review Muppets from Space? Because I got some things to say about that movie.
Yeah, that's a wild movie.
That's great.
When this was released, it had like an okay performance at the box office. I think it eventually it opened at like 5 million and eventually was like 23 million, something like that. It was released up against both Home Alone 2 and Aladdin, so it was not necessarily in the best position to do super well. In the box office.
Why would Disney do that? That's cutting off your nose to spite your face. Space these things out. Wow, okay. And 92 was also Batman Returns, if I'm not mistaken. So, like, there was a lot of, like, Christmas themed stuff. And, like,
that's a lot, yeah.
It was one of those times like when, like, the Die Hard thing, when there's like a lot of movies about Christmas when it's not about Christmas. Right. We're not getting into that conversation. You're basic. It's not that original. Anyway.
Yeah, I do think Disney expected this to perform better than it did, but it overall wasn't a disappointment. Review wise, it seems like reviews are pretty mixed. Like there's very few places where it got like the 5-star out of 5-star. This is like perfect review, which is surprising given I think the public reception. But then I think that oftentimes critical reception and public reception are not necessarily always in alignment.
It's also probably, it's not Jim Henson, it's not real Muppets. I mean, don't forget, he had just passed away a year, a little bit before this. So there was probably like, this isn't the real thing. And the purists out there have a loud voice sometimes. And so be it.
It's possible. It's possible. I think publicly it was received pretty well. So,
I'm just saying from the critics. For the critics, would have been like, this isn't what Jim Henson would have done. He would have never done this. And it's like,
which is weird because it's like all the same people who work with Jim Henson, and it's Jim Henson's son, and it's like the same guy that wrote Rainbow Connection wrote all the music in this movie. Like,
right?
It aside from Jim Henson not being there, it's the most Jim Henson thing ever.
We'll get into this, but in a lot of ways, I feel like this is one last hurrah. Like let's do this one for Jim.
It is the transition, I think, between like the classic Muppet films and like the 90s era Muppet films like we were talking about, right? It is that kind of changeover from one thing to the other.
Right. And it's done very well, and we'll get into it more in a second, but you got names like Frank Oz and a lot of the original puppeteers here. This is not like everybody left.
Right,
no,
exactly.
The crew's still together.
Yeah. Jimmy, what's your favorite Muppet film?
My favorite Muppet film is Muppets Take Manhattan.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's real good.
This is up there. I mean, it's neck and neck with this. This is one of my favorite Muppet movies, but Muppets Take Manhattan I saw first. And it's in my mind, it's like the perfect setting for the Muppets. The Muppets are not even the Muppets. Anyway, the Muppets, it's, what's great about it is it's New York, right? It's the best Manhattan movie.
It's very good.
Jason doesn't even go really to Manhattan that much, and Jason takes Manhattan. Like Hercules, it's not even Arnold's voice in some versions. Like this is the best. That's the best Muppets in a setting movie.
I love the through line of the Muppet movie, right, is like origin story, and then the Muppet Show, right, you can imagine as like a continuation from there, right? They do the show, and then like Muppets Take Manhattan is sort of like the ending of that, and it's like a nice like sort of series in that way, the way it all interconnects. And then my favorite Muppet movie is in the middle of that, which is The Great Muppet Caper. I love The Great Muppet Caper.
I gotta give The Great Muppet Caper a second chance. I didn't like it as much as a kid. I didn't like the Miss Piggy's arc in that one as much. I felt like, I don't know, I like her at the end of that movie. I mean, look, there are some great like Muppet bits in that movie. The pairing of Gonzo, Fozzie, and Kermit as like this like little reporter team. It's that's great. That's Goofy, Mickey, and Donald right there and there. Like, that's
I think
great.
Watching it now as like a send up of the sort of like 70s era like spy thrillers, right? Like the kind of stuff that Michael Caine was in, right?
He would have had a cameo in that one, actually.
That's, I think, the thing that really sells it for me. And then I think that movie has like all of my favorite Muppet cameos, like the Peter Falk cameo, where he's like the weird hobo that tries to sell Kermit a watch and has this like really long like non sequitur monologue. There's the John Cleese one where they're like having dinner and talking about the pig climbing up the outside. Like, I think it's just like a fun movie. I think it's a little offbeat as well for Muppets.
My favorite cameo, while we're on cameos, is in Muppets Take Manhattan when Gonzo goes to the mayor of New York at the time, and it's like, have you seen a frog? And he's like, if he can balance the budget, I'll hire him. It's like, that's a great even if you don't know who that is when you're a little kid, you get a mayor, you kind of get what that goes for. The best cameos I find are the ones that if you're in on it, you laugh. If you don't know who they are, it's still funny.
It's very interesting. I mean, we'll get into this with this movie because we need to, I guess, transition back. How few cameos. There really aren't any cameos in this.
No, this movie, and we can go into it as soon as we start, but it balances a certain tone.
Yeah.
And that tone has wiggle room, and it can do very Muppety things, either left or right of where we're trying to go for it, but it can't sway too far one way. Yeah. And I think that would be. Muppets can have cameos in this, not humans. And we'll get into that.
It's interesting how that's done. And so that brings us around to like the only big name in this movie, which is, of course, Michael Caine, who plays Scrooge. Interesting facts. So there were several other people that were considered for the role before they gave it to Michael Caine. One of them was Ron Moody, who played Fagin in Oliver.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
There were a couple other like British character actors that were considered. George Carlin was in the running. Like, he was a late favorite to play the role.
Shiny Time Station George Carlin was in the running?
Yeah. Would have been interesting, right? I mean, I feel like he would play a very interesting take on Scrooge.
But see, that is in keeping with more of a Muppet choice.
Yeah.
If they went with Carlin, he would have been Scrooge in a 70s Muppet Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
If they were casting carols back then, that's what they would have done.
The other one that I thought was really interesting, given the episode we just did, they were thinking about David Warner.
Yeah, I could see
Which would have been a fun
that.
tie for him to go from being Bob Cratchit to being Scrooge. Like, there was a part of me that was almost like, I really would have liked to see that, actually. Now, what's interesting about Michael Caine being cast as Scrooge, that means that we have now seen 3 of the 4 film Alfreds appear in A Christmas Carol, right? Because we've had Andy Serkis, who's going to be Alfred in the Batman. We now have Michael Caine, and we had what's his face from the original ones as one of the charity collectors. So they've all appeared in like different roles. But I was just like, oh, that's funny. That's like a weird little coincidence.
And Jeremy Irons got to be in one of these somewhere.
I know. Right? I started racking my brain. Like, has Jeremy Irons been in A Christmas Carol anywhere?
Well, that's another question for another day, because today we are here to talk about one of the biggest there is, a Muppet Christmas Carol. Yeah.
So why don't we get into it, James?
Let's do it, boss.
This is Jacob Marley is Dead, and we are finally talking about the Muppet Christmas Carol.
What was in those ships, all 3, on Christmas Day, on Christmas Day? And what was in those ships, all 3, on Christmas Day in the morning?
So we open with this really, really great model shot of the roofs of London.
Backing up, because this is the most notes I ever took for one of these. Just letting you know, I have a
this
note.
Will be a 6-hour-long episode.
I have a note per minute, so we're good. Perfect font. The font, the lettering for this.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful logo,
which appears over the model shot, is just perfect. I don't know what it's called. It's wonderful. It's that's what I think of when I see A Christmas Carol in my head, is the font for this movie.
Yeah, I think production design is not something you're ever going to be able to take fault with in a Muppets movie. That's kind of their whole shtick, right? Is like they're just the elegant detail of their
everything.
Design.
Everything feels right for this universe to live in this universe, and some stuff might again bend one way or the other, but they keep it consistent. They don't break.
Right. This is there's like a kind of in memory of Jim Henson here, and I believe there was another Muppet performer who I feel bad because I didn't write his name down, but Jim Henson, and then there was another kind of famous Muppet associate who had passed away, and this film was dedicated to both of them. But I think it just gets in memory of Jim Henson at the beginning, if I remember correctly.
This is the first. Again, they did the special and maybe a few things here and there, but this is the first big thing.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, just for a little context before we get into it, this is a Disney movie, right?
Yeah.
Disney was just about to do a big partnership with the Muppets right before Jim's death. They actually had a whole television special, the Muppets in the parks, and where they were like acting like all 4 parks were like one park or something like that. It was weird. And they sneak in and they're getting around into trouble. Like, this is like, they were all ramped up, ready to do a lot of stuff. And then Jim passed away. So there's all this creativity, I feel like, and all this energy. And I feel like it's that's why it's so like the intro to this movie and the credits and the tone is so somber and yet strong.
Yeah, they really don't rush into anything. It's like a long shot over these roofs that they built in this studio in England.
I love the Kermit the Frog laser logo.
Oh yeah, that's a classic.
I don't think, was that used in Muppets Treasure Island?
Yes.
So that
was kind of like a 90s Muppets thing, if I remember correctly.
So there's a sound in there that reminds me of if you've ever ridden the Muppets ride in Hollywood Studios in Disney, there's this ride that has this like 3D CGI like side character who's annoying everybody in it. I swear that's the sound of the bzzz when they're lasering out the thing and it zips away.
It's entirely possible. That's like a little.
I think it's like maybe the
Easter egg.
Disney Henson, like we're working together logo. I like it.
Yeah. So we get Gonzo in this has been cast in the role of Charles Dickens, and they give him Rizzo as his sidekick. And I could be wrong because I know like Rizzo kind of has like a minor appearance in The Great Muppet Caper. Is he more featured in The Muppets Take Manhattan?
I think he was a hit in Great Muppet Caper, and so the entire like mid to second act of Muppets Take Manhattan is set in a diner with Kermit. And the rats work in the kitchen, and they help out, and that's the whole part of Muppets Take Manhattan is they meet more Muppets that get into the musical at the end. Right. So yeah, he's in that one a lot, and
but this is, I think, his first like big feature where he's like a main player, right?
Yes, he's like this is like he's titled
because from this point forward he's a thing. Like Rizzo is a mainstay.
Muppets Tonight would be the '95 like new Muppet show that would come out after this, and he's one of the big hosts of that show. So like Gonzo was big. Gonzo and Rizzo were a big 2-man act. In the '90s Muppets material,
because that was like a big in the Treasure Island. They were like the sidekicks to Jim Hawkins,
this is why, because here as our narrators for this movie and the POV for the children as well, they are amazing. The work they do in this as their two different Muppets are amazing.
Yeah,
and so, going back to real quick, back to the model. All one shot, a pan down over the model, and it's one shot consistently until we transition to a London street and get Gonzo.
And you just get this like eyeful of like this Muppet marketplace. It's really good. So the whole thing is that like Gonzo and Rizzo are going to be kind of following the characters around, narrating the story, adding elements from like the original text and also some like kind of original narration lines, which I think is like in most places really helpful in sort of adding to our understanding of like what the characters are going through. They also break up some of the like it's just Scrooge alone and there's not much funny going on, right? There's not much like Muppet stuff going on because it's just him sort of hanging around. They do a lot of like they kind of are like the good version of Gabriel and Skinflint from the 2001 animated version, right? Where they're trying to distract you the whole time. This is more like just giving you kind of like a palate cleanser between scenes.
Like I said, the best version of what it's trying to do. We're trying to do a version of A Christmas Carol where kids can watch it, get the story, but also have fun in a 90s way with a little bit of 90s humor and Muppet humor in there. And I did not. There are a few jokes in there that I'm like, I don't know about that. But everything else is pretty solid from these guys.
Yeah. So they introduce Scrooge, and this does like a smart thing that the Albert Finney Scrooge didn't do, which is they leave Scrooge a little bit of a mystery. You're only told about him by like the other people around him. What's also nice is like he's super tall because they're all Muppets. So Michael Caine is like walking through and like they're all singing about him and you're just getting him from like the waist down for the most part.
You mean Darth Vader walks in? Good God. He is like Rizzo and Gonzo have this wonderful exchange. Like as he walks in there, where, there, when, now. And they just boom, they cut right there. And out he walks and the score kicks in. And my Lord.
Oh, this is such a good song.
If you don't know anything about Scrooge, you're about to learn it all in the best intro to Ebenezer Scrooge ever.
Yeah, it's really good.
In my opinion.
Yeah, I'll risk a copyright strike and drop like a little tiny like bit of the music here for you to hear because it's really good.
There goes Mr. Skinflint, there goes Mr. Green, the undisputed master of the underhanded deed. He charges folks a fortune for his dark and drafty houses. Us poor folk live in misery.
It's even worse for mouses.
Please, sir, I want some cheese.
They really
chills
get into...
you to the bone.
Oh yeah,
like that guy in the first
good.
verse. Like he leans in and then they both join in that Scrooge, and then they start singing. What an amazing song to introduce Scrooge. Here comes Mr. Humbug. Of course.
And what's nice is you get introduced to basically like all the characters on this street. There's like these little mice that live in the wall. There's this guy selling vegetables. The businessmen in this are like the pigs from Pigs in Space. So it's
and they suck too, because before we even get into the song, they're just talking about, oh, that was an amazing lunch there. Yes, sir. What should we do now? Yes, let's have another meal, right? Like they talk like they're gluttonous, and it's like there are little, very subtle, but there are messages in here about like, oh, they suck. Oh, even though he's doing okay, it's pretty bad for that guy over there. They say in all rainbows here, like it's very nice.
Yeah, this movie is not going to spend a ton of time like explicitly talking about the plight of the poor and everything, but it's going to give you a lot of little nuggets and breadcrumbs for like, if you're an astute watcher, maybe a little bit more sophisticated than like a 10-year-old watching this, you're going to get like the economic disparity without it being like a main player. You know what I mean?
Right, but you're not going to not notice it as a kid. Like you might not get what it's saying, but you remember that character when something happens to them.
Yeah. You'll notice those differences. So there's a moment in the middle of this song where there's this little refrain, these like women singing a carol, and they sing about like, oh, he's probably lonely and sad, and all of this is just a front because he's actually in pain. He's like a victim of his own pride, whatever. And then they're all like, nah, screw that.
Scrooge walks by, looks at them singing about him, and there's a charity plate right there.
Yeah.
And
they
just walks by and they go, nah. And like,
he's really a jerk.
And it's so, and we have yet to see his face. We have seen nothing. We are looking at Scrooge from the POV of the Muppets, who build up a sizable part of this world. It's not like everyone's humans and there's like 5 Muppets. No, it's 50-50, if not 2/3 Muppets. Like it's
the humans are almost entirely always in the background. It's mostly Muppets and Michael Caine in this movie,
which makes him even more intimidating. Which makes him more like what is that guy?
He's like towers over all of them. It's really great, and the sets are built kind of to Muppet scale, so he always looks like he's like towering over the buildings a little bit too, which is a really interesting like visual take. I saw it couched somewhere that they were like, oh, like in some shots it's obvious that the houses are too small, but Brian Henson was kind of like, it's all right. Like I think it tells the story without us having to worry about whether or not things look to scale.
And you can look, we live in a world where there are smaller people. We're not going to, and we don't need to know why there are human Muppets and then there are animal Muppets and why there are also regular humans. We don't need that answer. That doesn't matter here. What matters is what does it make us feel in this moment while watching.
It's Muppet World.
And what I feel is that guy is the most scary Scrooge I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. Holy cow.
So we get like a shot of his face at the very end on like the last line of the song. He turns and kind of scowls at everybody. And Michael Caine, I would say early in this movie gives like really good Scrooge face, right? And we'll talk a little bit about how that progresses.
I will say from the beginning of this movie up until the turn and the delivery of the first from Scrooge, and in my opinion,
his humbug,
the best humbug is perfect. That is our entire perfect sequence of this movie.
Yeah. So Scrooge in this version is like a kind of traditional like money lender. He lends people money like for their mortgages and whatnot. That seems to be his big thing. And of course he comes in and Kermit is our Bob Cratchit, obviously.
Heck yeah, he is.
Yeah.
Did he get top billing in this too? Like it's Kermit before it's even Scrooge.
I don't remember. I'd have to go back and watch. I think Michael Caine gets top billing, but
no, Michael Caine's gets, and with Michael Caine.
Oh, he's like the featured player.
He's like the top human, but like Scrooge is top of the bill, and he earns it in this one. Oh my gosh.
But also, so in this version, which I really love, Bob has like a whole staff working under him of bookkeepers who are all the other rats, right?
I love this choice. I think it makes
Scrooge's business look more like it's thriving. That he needs like 12 bookkeepers,
right? Like he has to pay people, so he has more of a boss employer dynamic, right? It's not just Bob. We're seeing he's casting a wider net, right, of the people that he's affecting in the world. And We immediately meet somebody he's affecting when he walks to his desk, as Gonzo gives an amazing description of.
Oh yeah. He gives the wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous sinner line. It's very good.
It's just the way it comes out of his mouth. Gonzo, but like it's so good.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a guy in there who is like trying to get like an extension on his mortgage payment, and Scrooge basically ignores him. He's doing this like whole monologue about how he's sick, and the doctor takes his part too and whatever. And Scrooge just picks him up and chucks him out the door, and then is like, "All right, let's get to these eviction notices." With glee, I mean, he's like a gleefully evil person at the beginning of this particular adaptation.
He's somebody trying to be funny while doing horrible things because he feels justified in doing them. But not really. Yeah. But he thinks, oh, it's just the way of the world, so let's joke about the way of the world, gallows humor and all. And it's this weird, like, he's trying to get Kermit in on the joke too, and Kermit is like, yeah, dude, totally. That's great.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. Yeah. Harvest time for the debt collectors.
He's like, that whole, that's a rough line. I love when
it's a Scrooge line.
Scrooge. Yeah. I love when he says, we're going to give out the eviction notices tomorrow. And Kermit's like, oh, it's Christmas. And he's like, oh, you can gift wrap them. Like, it's very, very, very cruel and cynical.
Right.
Okay. So look, here's the thing with Michael Caine in this movie. Michael Caine, famously, and I think this is one of the, like, people love this movie for this reason. Like, Michael Caine came in and he was like, I'm going to play this like it's the Royal Shakespeare Company. I'm not going to do anything winking. I'm not going to do anything puppety or muppety. I'm just going to play it totally straight and let the Muppet stuff happen around me. And I think that's a really good choice. I also think that he needed someone to help him shape the arc of the character a little bit more, because I think that his Scrooge is a little bit inconsistent throughout this movie.
So where in this moment are you noticing that?
I think that he plays like he plays both like the angriest Scrooge that we've ever seen. So this is not necessarily the moment where I'm seeing the inconsistency. He's a super angry Scrooge, like violent. He's throwing things and yelling at people. Also, though, you get his like snide kind of like laughing at his own jokes and stuff. So there's like a little bit of Alistair Sim in there as well. And the inconsistency for me comes up later on. And so we'll talk about it when we get there. It's not enough to break the performance for me, but it's always something where I think I need to see more of like that Scrooge he is at the beginning, which is very strong, get like woven through the rest of the performance.
He is a man who lives in a world with Muppets, who doesn't want to live in a world with Muppets.
Totally. Yeah.
And that is why he is angry all the time.
Yeah.
Because it's like that's all he sees, and the only people he sees as humans in this movie are his family or people that he, like, how many humans are in this film?
There are three main human characters. It's Scrooge and Fred's wife, and that's it.
And Belle, and we'll get to Belle, right?
Oh, yeah, Belle. Yeah. Belle,
like, that's it. Mm-hmm. Everybody else in his, and like, he's just, I'm surrounded by these flipping Muppets. Yeah. Like, this is like, it's just like, he's always boiling. Like, and anytime they try to like talk to him or interact with him or tell joke to him, like, he just can't deal with it. I get what you're saying, but I don't think his anger works.
So let me be clear.
Here.
The anger is good.
Okay.
The anger is not the issue. It's when we get to like the Marley scene, I'll talk about some thoughts that I have, not specifically about the Marley scene, but like if this is our introduction to Scrooge, he's the baddest Scrooge, he's the scariest Scrooge, he's the angriest Scrooge, he's the cruelest Scrooge in a lot of ways, just in terms of on its face. He's giving a very like really, really going for it in this early moment. And then some things will happen later on that make me like, I wish I could see more of this. So
he's the bulliest of Scrooges.
Oh yeah, for real.
But I think that's why I think some choices later on make sense.
Yeah. So the the rats want more coal, and Kermit, the world's worst union organizer, is is trying to get Scrooge to give them more coal, and he's like, "Oh, maybe I'll just fire you." And then they're all like, "Oh, it was the frog's idea. Never mind. Forget it.
Oh, wait. You can't gloss over the unemployment line.
Yeah.
And then they had the costumes left over from the Beach Boys music video they did, Kokomo or whatever it was. And so they got like those, and they start dancing. I'm sorry. It's one of the funniest beats.
It's very good. Yeah. It's very good.
And it's like, oh man, it's just great.
Gonzo telling the story throughout this is also fantastic, like, because he's getting that Dickens language in there, and he's really delivering it with like gusto.
Best narrator we've had in any one of these movies.
Oh yeah,
by a country mile,
and the only one that's like consistently been a narrator throughout.
I mean, maybe it's a low bar, but he jumps over it by a mile. Like this guy is doing. What he's also doing is he's giving the information in a way that is interesting, right?
Right.
And consumable, but also with respect.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he's directly quoting.
Yeah, it's sincere. It's never played for a laugh. It's always like very sincere.
Exactly.
So we get a young Stephen Mcintosh, who's got to be the youngest Fred we've ever seen.
A good looking Fred. Like this is a handsome Fred.
Yeah. Very
like,
cheeky.
Yeah. I love his volleying with Scrooge. He takes none of it, and he's got an audience.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting how he disarms Scrooge in this.
He's got no fear of him.
Yeah.
He's got no fear.
It makes me really sincerely wish that there was more about their relationship in this version.
Wow.
Because he gets done dirty after this point in the movie, where they set him up as a very like well characterized, full of personality. He feels like a character that's really going to matter a lot, and then he super doesn't. Like in the rest of the movie, there's one very brief little scene, and then I mean, we'll talk about when we get to the ending.
Like a Mickey Mouse Christmas Carol, there's only so much you can do in certain this is a movie, and I'm not saying they had time. They could have put a scene in. They could make one scene just a little bit longer. Yes.
Yeah.
But as far as Fred intro scenes go,
top notch. It's really good. Yeah.
Because they do a great thing here. Because not only is it Fred's scene, and Fred gets the speech, and it's done with cadence, but like with like
it's fun. Yeah. It's full of life and youth and
pep, and then of course all the rats and Kermit in the background go here.
Yeah.
And Scrooge just comes in with another unemployment line, and and they just, if you gotta listen to the audio, they're just saying numbers. They're just saying 24, 28, 28, 29, 23, 22, 22, 21, 10, 10. Yeah, sure, 10. It's like,
it's very good. And what's interesting about this too is, so we never get it done this way, but Fred and the charity collectors actually overlap. Which I think is a really good choice. Like, it's a really good way to condense this scene, develop the characters a little bit. It really puts Scrooge under the gun, because not only is he dealing with the charity collectors, but also Fred kind of poking fun at him for how he's dealing with the charity collectors.
And we see Fred, by the end of this exchange, he donates.
Yeah.
We see he only has a hay penny or something, but he's got something in his pocket.
He's got something there. Yeah.
And he's giving it to them. And what's great is, like, he's jumping in on, like, Scrooge is like, I don't make merry at Christmas. That is true, says Fred.
Yeah.
I can't afford to make others merry. That is also not true. That is actually not true. He can afford it. And it's just a little. This is a great way to keep the energy and the motion going in a movie version of this.
Yeah,
it's
totally.
I mean, of course, this is how it would happen in real life. People would come into a shop, leave a shop, come into a shop, leave a shop. But in a movie where you don't want to see the same type of thing over and over again, it stops one of those repeaters.
And again, it does this thing where it gives Fred a lot more personality than he usually gets, because he's usually just there to be like the foil, and that's it. And again, when we get to stuff with Fred later on, I'm going to be like, it would have been nice to see some payoff for that. But
it would have been nice to either get some more references to Fred, and it would have been nice to get more of Fred and Kermit, obviously, because like that's always great when we know, and we do get, like, as Fred leaves at the end of this moment,
Yeah, they get a little interaction.
It's like, oh, we got to make sure that people know, like, okay, they interacted.
So the charity collectors are Bunsen, Honeydew, and Beaker, who my 3-year-old, my son, we're friends. We're bros. It's cool.
Hey,
he was watching this with me, and he was like, "Look, it's a grape and a French fry." I mean, it's accurate. Those are also just two foods that he likes. Like, he likes green grapes and he likes French fries. So
hey,
he just made the association.
Gotta get him. That's. John, you just derailed this podcast with that amazing joke, and it wasn't even yours.
yeah, I know. My son should be on the show more often.
But Bunsen and Beaker come in.
It's a great choice for these two characters, because
it's the choice. It's two very visually different Muppets, and it's also ones that are been paired together in a lot of stuff.
Right, they're kind of a duo.
And
the other person, so I think it makes sense for them because Bunsen's kind of like they're both meek characters, so they're characters that are easily pushed around. The other thought that I had was, assuming a certain casting choice didn't happen down the road, was that Statler and Waldorf would also have been funny in these roles and have it be like they're kind of like heckling him for not donating. But I like where we end up having them.
Oh, we're gonna get to that in a minute. But spoilers, that I'm gonna gush all over that scene.
Yeah.
They come in here and they overlap with Fred. And they have nice little banter back and forth. And as Fred leaves, Scrooge is really agitated because Fred keeps needling him. He's like, "My dear nephew," and it's like it just keeps building and building and building. And then Scrooge goes and looks up and sees that Bunsen, but he's just there.
Yeah, they're just standing there still.
Just tapping his fingers like, "So what can I put you down for?" And it's like, dude!
Read the room, man.
Get out of... The rats are scared. The frog is scared. You need to run. And it then just keeps going, and we get, of course, the line. And it's great. And that's the prompt to leave the house. And it's a great little scene. Beaker is awesome in the background here. Lots of great puppet network going on with this, because he's got a hat too, and he's able to like play around with. So good.
Yeah. So there's this bunny, like one of the little like bunnies with the fuzzy cheeks, out on the stoop singing a Christmas song, and Scrooge like slams the door in his face, so he walks away, and then Scrooge opens the door and he turns around like, "Oh, I'm gonna get a hay penny," and Scrooge like hucks Fred's Christmas wreath at him in the snow.
More accurate than he would be with like. He wasn't aiming at Tiny Tim that one time with the bucket full of water.
Yeah.
He was locked in.
But that's where I mean, like, this is like his take is very overtly agitated and aggressive at this beginning, which I like, because I think we often see a Scrooge who's angry, but in that like depressed, defeated anger kind of way. We don't often see like a raging Scrooge, which I enjoy a lot.
This Scrooge is mad at the world he lives in, mad at the circumstances he's in, and it's not his fault at all. And if these silly creatures would just stop being so darn silly, I could maybe, enjoy my life a little bit. But no.
So Kermit, asks for the day off, and they have this back and forth. I love when Scrooge asks him like, "You want the whole day?" And it's very like condescending and rough. And Kermit's rationale, which is very smart, is basically like, no one else is doing business. Like, it's going to be pointless for anyone to be here. And Scrooge is like, all right.
Smartest Cratchit.
Yeah.
Smartest Cratchit.
Very reasonable. And so Scrooge leaves, and this gives way to my favorite song in the movie. I love One More Sleep Till Christmas. I love the lighting in this scene. I love like the song. I love the stuff that happens during the song. I love the ending of this song. It is so good.
There's something in the wind today that's good for everyone. Yeah. Yes, faith is in our hearts today. We're shining like the sun. And everyone can feel it the feeling's running deep. After all, there's only one more week till Christmas.
It's so good.
It has. Stephen Sondheim was talking about how, like, in the 60s, musicals no longer wrote pop songs, right? Rock and roll came along, took the pop song genre away from Broadway musicals. But every once in a while, you get something that transitions from a musical into popular music, right? I don't know if they did this at the time, but it's definitely made the transition from just the musical right here into Christmas music and pop music. This is a song you hear on the radio, or at least you should hear it more. This is a perfect Christmas song.
Yeah, it's really good. And it's cool because it's like all lit by candlelight. It's like a soft focus camera. The rats are all doing like little somersaults and stuff to close the drapes and shut everything down. And then they go out into the streets and there's a part of me that would have liked for like Tiny Tim to be involved in this instead of it just being like Kermit and the rats. But I do sort of like holding the Tiny Tim reveal so that we get it the same time that Scrooge does in this version, because I think the way they do Tiny Tim in this has a lot of impact.
Tiny Tim's got a lot of strength in the way they use him. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
But going back to here, I think because the rats are there, like you have the rats around him, so he's got people to interact with, and he is so cool with his coworkers here. It's such this wonderful like dynamic and relationship. The way they put away the shop for the night.
Yeah,
it's like,
I like Kermit as a middle manager.
Come on, if you wanted a boss, you want Kermit the Frog as your boss. Like he's.
I don't know. He yells at a lot of people on the Muppet Show. Like he gets stressed really easily.
Yeah,
I feel like that would be a toxic work environment.
Yeah, but that's because they don't have Scooter there doing the heavy lifting like he should.
Yeah, Scooter is not in this movie. It's really interesting that they
Where
just like couldn't find
him?
a place for him. I don't know. I don't know. I think even like in one of the street scenes, like have him be Fred. You know what I mean? Like
he can't be. You have to have a human there for Fred. You do have to have a human for Fred and Fred's wife. You need that scene.
There was a place where he was going to be in this, and we'll talk about that when we get there.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know about that. Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about that, but some changes were made and he didn't end up making the cut.
He was supposed to be the Ghost of Christmas Future.
So close. So there's this great sequence here where Kermit is like sliding on ice with these penguins. And so I have the thing with these Muppet movies, right? Like the Muppets is always about innovation in how to use puppets for entertainment purposes, right? I feel like the Muppet Show, like a lot of the sketches are like, here's this wacky experimental puppet that we're going to roll out and like do a whole number with, right? And then the movies are like, let's see how far we can push the medium of puppets for storytelling visually. Like, can we get a puppet to be moving its mouth while it jumps across the ice and like slides through a scene? How can we make that happen? And there's some shots in this movie that really are like outstanding in terms of how they make a puppet look like a living thing moving in space.
Yeah, and with that also you have this like, has it aged perfectly? No, but
it's kind of okay.
But it's quick. And you laugh at it. You're in on the joke.
Yeah,
you're in on the innovation in a sense. You kind of made aware, like, oh, they can do the legs now for a little bit. Like it, and that is what Henson wanted to do. Henson wanted to keep evolving puppetry and using, the Muppets and Sesame Street as like a starting point to get to other places, like you would with Dark Crystal and Labyrinth.
Yeah, there's a shot later on in this movie that I think is like one of my top 10 favorite shots in any movie ever. There's
a lot in it. Like there's a lot of great puppet work in here that isn't even just the Muppets. It's just like what, like you see what craftsmanship is in there, and it's awesome.
Yeah. And then we get like a little this great shot of Kermit like standing looking at the moon singing the last line of the song, and then the camera pans over and it's the bunny from earlier, and he's like wrapped up in a newspaper and freezing. He looks like Elliot Loudermilk in Scrooged.
So good. It's such a nice little beat because it's like, it's not like Cratchit's doing okay.
Yeah,
he's got a lot of kids. He's got Tiny Tim at home, but he's got a house. He's got a family. He's got food. Yeah. He's got Christmas to look forward to. This poor bunny's got nothing.
Yeah.
And
it's an interesting Chekhov's gun because we're not going to see him again until the very end of the movie.
And it's also a nice way of reminding how layered life is and how there are many different types of experiences.
Yeah.
Which some versions won't even go that far.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's your transition back into like, okay, we had Kermit and the Rats and fun, yay, Christmas, and now it's like, all right, back to Scrooge.
Yeah.
So we get Scrooge. We get Scrooge walking up to his house, which, I mean, a lot of the sets in this all kind of look the same. They're all these like kind of narrow city streets.
Look, you've seen one foggy London town. You've seen them all, but
yeah, it's true.
But let's not take away from the fact that the lighting is great here.
Oh yeah, these things are true throughout.
The quality, like John was mentioning earlier, of Muppet Productions is amazing. This ain't cheap. It might not look real in certain shots, but it ain't cheap. This is beautiful.
Yeah. So he, and we get, Gonzo and Rizzo again are there providing the narration, kind of getting you to that place.
There's great handwork here with Rizzo and Gonzo, especially Rizzo. He's got very small hands on his puppet, and they're just doing these, he's doing a recurring bit throughout the movie about jelly beans. So he's doing lots of picking up, moving around, and there's like a little bit of finger manipulation on the puppet, which is tough to do, and it works.
Yeah.
It doesn't look, because if you've ever seen it, you've seen a normal puppet body, then you have the arms that go with it, right? And there's always that disconnect, like when the cat would have the arms coming for the side to wipe the eyes off on the Simpsons gif, like that type of thing. But here it doesn't feel that way. It feels like this is Rizzo, and he's just pointing over there. And I just want to make note of that. It's really good work.
Yeah, I don't think like it's the Muppets. It's literally the best puppets the whole time forever.
But that's the
say
thing.
It every single time.
But no, because here's the thing: we feel that way. We know that, John. But I don't think people really like. If we don't sing these praise, look, we get it. The Muppets are great. But if we don't talk about it, if we don't acknowledge it, then they get forgotten and they get lost. And they did for a little bit. And now we're kind of like the kids from the 90s and 80s who grew up on that era of Muppets are holding the light up more. And we got to keep it going because there is a quality to Muppets and the Muppet style that is something that is unique in medium. And we need to sing its praises as much as possible to keep it going.
Yeah, I would say, and some of this is like some of like I think the best Muppet puppeteering in any of the Muppet films. Like there's some really inventive stuff going on.
It's great.
So Scrooge goes up to his door, and his door knocker turns into Statler's face because I guess Statler and in theory Waldorf are going to appear here as the Marley brothers who have. It's kind of been seeded, like we know the Marleys are dead, right?
The
so
Marleys
we know there's going to be more than one.
Great, by the way, let's go back to that a second. Great delivery of "The Marleys is dead" by Gonzo. And then they talk about like how it makes them feel, but it's like that is my beginning of a relationship with this movie. Is that's because it's the opening of the movie and how strong of that is. Like that, this podcast gets that name from that. Yeah, that is how deep in my mind that intro is laid in. It's 100%.
What's great is like, so this Marley yells at Scrooge, like it's really alarming, and Scrooge like falls back, and then it knocks Gonzo and Rizzo off of this like horse that they're on, so they're laying there in the snow, and then Gonzo does this exorcist like pop up to deliver a piece of narration from being unconscious, which I think is really great.
It was awesome. And the door knocker very nicely done.
Oh yeah,
because it's like three different effects going at once. It's dissolved to make it with some practical, and like probably three different door knockers or something like that.
Probably,
and it's like, and when they get that manipulation with that cry, like you're saying, the door kind of does a digital stretch, and it's right on the edge of looking fake. Of like it doesn't. Well, it is fake, but like it doesn't. Like it's
like effecty,
right. But it's not there yet, and I love it.
Yeah. So Scrooge goes inside, and Gonzo and Rizzo do a lot of business of like trying to climb up to the window to see inside, and then Scrooge is like turning on a little light, hunting through the house. He beats the ever-living crap out of his dressing gown because he thinks it's like a ghost, which is a great moment. And then he's like, oh, it's my dressing gown. And then the next scene, he's wearing the dressing gown that he was just beating up.
It's great. It's like no harm. It's okay. It's no damage.
Yeah.
But you can tell, and Gonzo lets you know through Dickens' words, like he's shook. He is very nervous right now.
Yeah. So the Marley scene starts off. He's sitting in front of the fire, and he hears like just the little bell start ringing. He's sort of settled in.
No gruel.
Yeah, no gruel in this one.
My Scrooge doesn't have any gruel. My Scrooge has a piece of bread and some sort of cheese or cake. I'm not sure.
Whatever it is. Yeah.
And like he's just gonna, not even utensils, he's just gonna rip at it and eat it like a caveman.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
barbarian Scrooge here.
His fire goes out, which is great. And then we get this like shot that kind of pans around him. We hear the bell ringing, and then from his stairwell leading up into his room.
Well, with the bell, we get these great like staggered zooms on his face,
mm-hmm.
and it's like this. It's not quite like Evil Dead or something like that, but it's like the camera is moving, and there are a few handheld moments in this movie which give it a really unique energy, and they're all on Scrooge.
Yeah,
like Scrooge gets handheld stuff, and that's great.
Yeah, and then we see all this light kind of flickering in his stairwell, and then the Marley brothers pop up, right? So it's Statler and Waldorf kind of floating. Their arms are chained, their legs are chained. There's not really much else chain on them at this point. And I remember at that time being like, it's not a lot of chains. Like, I would like to see more chains, right? And then I was like, I remember this being like pretty chained up. We'll talk when we get there.
You thought it wasn't enough chains.
I know, right? So I love they're lit from above, which gives them a really eerie look because they both got these like dead, starey eyes because they're puppets, and this really highlights that.
They look like statues. Yeah. They look like a gargoyle or a statue at a graveyard, which is perfect for this.
Yeah, it's really appropriate. So this is Jacob and Robert Marley, which is my favorite joke in the whole movie.
Yeah.
I love that just once in one of these, they're able to work in a Bob Marley joke. I love it.
It's subtle. It's the way you should do it. You never actually say it, right?
Yeah.
But it's there if you pick it up. And look, they needed you don't want to lose one of them, right? But they're perfect to be Jacob Marley.
And I feel like if it wasn't Statler and Waldorf, then it would be Gonzo, right?
Right, but then you have to have Kermit be Scrooge, and like Kermit can't be Scrooge.
I don't even know if you need to have Kermit be Scrooge. I think you can still have a human Scrooge. I think Gonzo is like, because like Fozzie in this is Fezziwig. Like we'll get there. You know what I mean?
They needed a human Muppet to be the Marleys.
Yeah.
There's something about being human and like the animal Muppets are kind of pure in this a little bit. Like they're not as like, I mean, there are some villains, and we'll see some later on, but like for the most part, they're pretty decent to one another. And it's only when things are really dour that like we see even the animal Muppets go like, what? Yeah. Like,
no, I think Statler and Waldorf are a great choice because they are always cast in kind of antagonistic roles anyway. Right. This has to be the biggest feature they've ever had in a Muppet anything, right?
I mean, the Muppet movie that they made back in like 2010, they're not the main characters, they do play a major part in that movie.
But up until this point, like...
Oh, no, this is besides the Muppet Show, this is their biggest like role in something, yes.
Yeah. Because they get like their own song and everything here.
This might be the biggest. Yeah, now thinking about it, like this might be their peak, and it's good, dude. This song rocks.
Marley and Marley is great.
We're Marley and Marley. Ooh.
We're Marley and Marley. Our hearts were painted black. We should have known our evil deeds would put us both in shackles. Captive bound, we're double iron, exhausted by the weight. As freedom comes from giving love, so prison comes with hate.
This is my son's favorite song.
Yes.
he's like, play the Marley song. He was singing it earlier. I was rewatching it this morning to like finish my notes, and he was singing along to this song. Thinking back to our conversation earlier about Michael Caine as Scrooge, this is the moment where his character starts to get a little flat for me because he sort of like pushes back against them a little bit at first, and then he's very soft for the rest of this. And pretty much for the rest of this movie, he's going to be a very like emotionally vulnerable Scrooge. in a way that I don't think is fully earned.
He's a bully who was bullied by the Marleys.
Yeah.
So he goes back mentally to that state when they're there.
Yeah.
And that's
it is kind of like Guy Pearce, I guess, where he like goes back to his childhood.
Right. And like here he's like, you always criticize me, which is we're always heckling you, which is like, okay, that's their gimmick. I get where you're going. But if that's a part of this relationship, which I've always, maybe because of this movie, looked at the Marley Scrooge relationship like that. Like, Marley probably had no time and didn't even like Scrooge that much. And here, that is definitely the case. Yeah. And they are like, they needle him, they make fun of him, he references that, and you get the sense that he was the abused one out of the three of them in this relationship, and that doesn't mean he's good now. Hurt people, and he's hurting everybody else.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's what I take away from it. Like, he doesn't look hard towards them.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I could see that read. I think that makes a lot of sense. It
might not be what people would like at this moment, but at least that's where I could see it.
Yeah. And for me, it's not just this moment. This is just where it starts, where I think Michael Caine flips a switch with Scrooge and never flips it back, or I lose any sense that he really needs much convincing after this point. Like, there's maybe a little bit at the end of this scene, and we'll talk about that when we get there, but my grand unifying theory of Michael Caine as Scrooge is that once he starts interacting with the spirits, he just seems like kind of like a sad guy when he starts off as like a villain. And I think that I preferred, like, thinking back to George C. Scott, where he's pushing them and they're pushing him back, and it's a process to get him where he is at the end, versus Michael Caine's pretty much sold by the time he gets to like the second ghost, and we're all just sort of waiting for the ghosts to be over so he can go do the nice things.
He's in this movie with the Muppets, but not only are the Muppets just living in his life, he's now got these spirits, right? These ghosts that are Muppets. And he has to sell a difference between the two of them. And he has to sell that difference. And how is he going to sell it? He's going to be awestruck. He is going to be in the presence of the supernatural. He is going to be in the presence of something otherworldly. So to sell that, he's got to take every interaction with them to be like, I have seen the face of God. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like, and that's the thing. Like, he's like, the Marleys get a little bit pushback, and he's not as hard as he is with other things. But in a moment, we're going to see, like, he's still putting up a little bit. But it comes to a point where, like, he can't put up the fight anymore because he lives in a world with Muppets, and there's even something weirder than Muppets.
Yeah. Yeah. So throughout this song, the chains are kind of sentient, and like the cash boxes are singing, right?
And they slowly...
they get more and more chained up. The chains wrap around Scrooge at one point. They're getting up in his face, and by the end of it, they are like mummified. They are so wrapped up in chains. The chains are dragging them back down. It's really good. It's quite good.
And like they're trying to get to Scrooge.
Yeah,
they're trying to get to Scrooge to shake him. Yeah. To say what's going on. Like, yeah. Doomed, Scrooge. You're doomed for all time. Like, that's when they get as close to Ebenezer as they're going to get for the whole movie. And it's like, that's when they got laying that message. Like, you're screwed. And as soon as they get that close, the chains coil around them, and they're being pulled away, and they're being choked. And right before that, they make a joke about how they were like, how cruel they were, and how they got rid of the orphanage, and like they remember the little orphans with their frozen teddy bears, and then they shudder with regret and shame. Yeah, and like it's so powerful to
like
see
in the Mickey one where Goofy's like, yeah, I robbed widows and swindled the poor, and he's like, oh no, wait, I was wrong.
but unlike there.
It's not played for a laugh. Like it's
sincere.
Yeah.
No, they are in pain, and they realize the weight of what they did, and they give the role gravitas that I think other Muppets wouldn't.
Yes,
I think they bump up certain, like, because they don't have time for the Muppet stuff on the Muppet Show. We know that they don't have time for certain stuff here.
Yeah,
like.
And as soon as they're gone, on their last note, the fire springs back up and Scrooge is like left alone, which is a nice. I love the fire going out and then coming back is a really nice touch to kind of like shift the lighting and the mood in this moment.
Oh, lighting here again. Lighting is amazing, and we're gonna get to that in a second.
Yeah, it's true. So Scrooge gets his fire poker, gets his candle. He's like, I'm going to bed with my poker. Like, I'm not going to play around.
I guess I never noticed it on the VHS, but like it's right there in the nice digital one.
To be fair to Scrooge in this, he does give us a nice like humbug, I don't believe this, right before he closes the curtain and goes to bed.
It's a beautiful bed scene transition.
Yeah.
Humbug.
Yeah. So that brings us to the end of the Marleys. We're going to take a quick break here, and then when we come back, we'll talk about the Ghost of Christmas Past.
If I stopped you half a crown for it, you'd think yourself ill-used, wouldn't you? But you don't think me ill-used if I pay a day's wages for no work, do you? It is only once a year, sir. It's a poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December.
All right, so we're back. Scrooge is in his bed. There's a really great shot of him laying in the bed. He's like shot from above, and you can see the candlelight coming through the curtains. It's like way better than any shot in this movie has a right to be. It's very, very good. This movie has a lot of really good shots, but this one in particular stood out to me. I think it's a really, really good one.
There are certain beats when they want to emphasize time and the transition into the supernatural.
Yeah, so it's one of several moments where you forget this is a Muppet movie because it just feels very like lived in and period and appropriate. The lighting is really, really great.
And we do these like little, like we see his eye flicker a little bit. We hear the clicking of the clock and we get closer and closer to Scrooge's face.
Yeah.
And then the bells.
Yeah, well, and there's a whole bunch of business here with Rizzo and Gonzo trying to get up to the window to see what's going on as well. There's like the whole gag where Rizzo climbs over the gate and jumps, but then he has to go back and he just walks through the bars to get his jelly beans. Right, there's a lot of good like personality development for the two characters.
And it was at that moment I was like, is Gonzo John? Am I Rizzo? Like...
I would say it's like an appropriate take on our relationship.
I'm not saying it's 1-to-1 across the board, but like in that little dynamic there for a second, I was like, yeah, that's not right.
Yeah. Another one of my favorite moments here is when Gonzo it's Gonzo's standing on the branch of this tree and he's got his arms spread out and we're looking like down from below up at the window and his voice is like echoey because it's like, expect the first ghost when the bell tolls 1, and then like the lights blast on from the window and like the wind blows his cape and I'm like, oh, Gonzo's out here being like a BA narrator guy. What is this?
It's Gonzo auditioning for Doctor Who. I'll tell you right now.
It's something, yeah.
Side note, if the Doctor regenerated into Gonzo, I'd watch that show.
The Ghost of Christmas Past is not a traditional Muppet. It is a new puppet that's been created solely for this role.
Before we even get to the ghost, though, we got to talk about this one shot here. We get this side shot of Scrooge lying on the bed. Gonzo says, when the bell tolls 1, the bell tolls 1. As soon as it happens, simultaneously, the room from the other side of his bed curtains is lit up with the brightest light you have ever seen in your life.
Yeah, it's very bright.
It's gorgeous. And it's like, that's why I feel like Scrooge has like no arguments here. Like can't say anything because it's like divine presence is right there. And Scrooge's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. So originally, when they were originally planning this, the ghosts were all going to be traditional Muppets. They were going to be Muppet characters in these roles. So this ghost was going to be either Robin the Frog, who ends up being Tiny Tim, or Scooter.
This is why it's good to workshop things.
Yeah.
Because what you get instead is not the best 1-to-1 adaptation of the book. That is still probably the Richard Williams one.
Sure.
That one, because that's as close to as what the book is trying to do with this ghost as you're ever going to get. But this is something new.
Yeah.
It's something unique. and something memorable and something that works.
Yeah.
Like, this is a great, like, if you're doing like child, middle-aged, deaf, you know, this is a great way to start off here, and the nostalgia of childhood represented in such a pure ball of joy. Like, it's a slightly different interpretation. This ghost isn't as like indifferent as I mean, it is, but it's not the same. Like, you don't get the same like subtle sniping as you would get with other ghosts here. It's more just a matter of fact, but like, just, it is the past, you know?
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
So this puppet it's like a child's head, a little bit uncanny valley, like it's so realistic that it makes you uncomfortable, which I think is the intention.
Right.
It's got red hair, and then it's got just kind of like a shimmery, like, garment of some kind. That's it. There's no body. It's just like a floating head with like a wispy body. So, James, how do you think that this was filmed? How did they make this floaty thing happen?
I'm going to tell you right now, I have no idea how they actually did it, but this is how I would do this effect if I had the money and resources to. You would get it in water. You would put it in water, and you would put it, and you would have a fabric that they're using here, and you would light it from underneath in water, that then you could green screen the water out, and as few air bubbles in there as possible. And then you might do this twice or 3 times to then overlay everything. So you have this kind of like always moving, but you're never quite sure what's real or what's not real. Like 50%, like 30% on this one, 30% on that one. Like, everything is kind of equal footing, but like it's similar movement. I don't know, but is that what they did?
So you're very close. So I think your take is a little bit more complicated than what they actually did.
Well,
they filmed everything with this puppet in a giant glass vat of baby oil. So the same idea where it's like submerged. In this one, it was a big thing of baby oil, which I think gave them probably a clearer picture than water would have.
That makes sense. That makes total sense. Yeah.
Filmed against a green screen, so everything with this ghost, right? This ghost is composited into the actual film, but it gives it the effect of everything floating a little bit. Right. They may have altered the speed of the film somewhat so it doesn't look quite so like liquidy. But yeah, basically to get like the floaty effect, it's all filmed in baby oil. And what's nice is it doesn't have to be that high def, because it is that like hazy kind of memory thing. Because it doesn't necessarily look like it's right there with Michael Caine, but it doesn't not look like it's not right there with him because of the way it's lit, because the eye line matching. They do a really nice job.
Like Marley at the Door Knocker, it doesn't have to look 100% real. It can look, but it has to look like it's manipulating our reality.
Yeah, kind of the benefit of it being Muppets too. It's like you're not looking for realism, you're looking for like fun puppetry.
Right, but also it's like you have like, we don't know what a spirit like this would do to our reality, you know, cause and effect. So some stuff is acceptable sometimes, right? It's not science here. This is a supernatural thing.
Yeah. So Christmas Past flies him out the window, and Gonzo uses like a grappling hook, to grab onto his ankle.
He used the grappling hook to climb the tree to get to the window for the shot. So it's not Looney Tune logic.
Right.
It was there.
Well, and what it does is like a thing that I really love with Gonzo and Rizzo in this, which is that they're kind of sketchy the whole time. Like, they're the narrators, but they also definitely exist in the world, and sometimes can be seen, sometimes can't, but they keep having to resort to these kind of bootleg methods to keep up with the story, which I think is very good. It's one of my favorite things in this movie.
Well, you're cheering for them.
Yeah.
We all know the story of A Christmas Carol, so there are no surprises here. It's just about the execution of the story. Yeah. So what's our hero here? Gonzo and Rizzo being able to keep up with the narrative. You're rooting for them to do what they need to do.
It also is kind of, I mean, okay, so let me put on my nerd hat, right? It's kind of like a meta commentary on the idea of narrative, of like having a narrator character who's there throughout, because it's not like they just keep popping up in the scenes. Like, that happens a couple of times, but a lot of times we see them have to go through some work to get into the place so that they can be there to tell the story, which is fun. Like, it's and different than like Skinflint and Gabriel, who are like the distraction characters in that 2001 version, who are just there to like do annoying stuff while you're trying to pay attention to the movie.
And unlike Gabriel and the other mouse in that version, because I refuse to keep both memories in my mind, unlike that version, this movie is kind of obvious that it's supernatural. It is this is a very I will admit that this version, this is supernatural stuff going on here, right? Especially because Gonzo and Rizzo are going through it with them, right?
Right. So,
in that version, though, the Nick Cage version, I know he's only Marley in that, but I don't care. It's the Nick Cage one. And that is leaning a lot on the possibility of it being a dream.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that makes the mice being able to travel with them through the memories and everything even more inconsistent with what they're telling us. Right. Here, Gonzo and Rizzo and the spirits, everything's real, and they're able to follow them, and that's how we know it's real in another way, right?
Yeah.
And we get a very good flying over London scene here.
Yeah, and like Gonzo and Rizzo are getting dragged through the trees and like coming out with a chicken on their head, and like there's funny stuff to make it like it's not just a straight take, but again, Michael Caine, everything he's doing is a straight take.
Right. And it's not Superman and Lois Lane flying. I mean, that's the best flying scene maybe ever. Just for taking it seriously and what's going on. But it's pretty good here, and the model again looks great.
It's very 1992 flying. It's what else can you say? Like, that's what we're getting here.
Oh my god, 1992 fly. No, wait a minute. Hook. That was 1991 flying though. Hook though had
Hook probably had more of a budget than this did.
Oh,
for, like,
most
the kinds
definitely.
of effects they're doing.
But that was 1991 flying. 1992 flying is Muppets. Christmas Carol.
So we get, I mean, the scene, Scrooge is like in the snow and there's all the kids and he's like, hey guys, it's me, Scrooge. And he like reverts to his childhood for a second. And then they go to the school. So this take, we are not getting like neglected by his parents, Scrooge. Or if we are, it's like, we're supposed to kind of infer it. It's not explicitly mentioned or spoken about. Like,
I know they mention it. I mean, they talk about like he was left there. Like they it's quick and they don't drag on it.
Yeah,
but because
it's definitely not a main focus. I would say like this movie doesn't present us with like a compelling origin for Scrooge's worldview, like, with the exception of like what the one thing that's happening next, but even that doesn't really work for me.
I don't know, because I feel like what happens here with Scrooge is like, again, he's taking the world seriously and nobody else is, right?
Yeah.
And he's taking it seriously because he's forced here by his parents. He's not home at Christmas. Now, this could be me hearing one line said by the Ghost of Christmas Past. It's kind of muddled. And then knowing everything I know about Scrooge's home life or the possibility of it, laying it in there after so many episodes. That's true too.
It's easy to read it into it when you kind of know like every other version of the story.
Right. But also though, what happens here is he's staying there and everybody else is leaving. I'm like, we're going home for Christmas, Ebenezer. Well, aren't you going to have fun at Christmas? He's not going to have fun at Christmas. He's going to be stuck there again. Who cares about stupid old Christmas? Christmas is the time when he's always left alone. And he hates Christmas because of that. Yeah. Again, how many episodes of this in? I'm now putting this onto this, but it's still there a little bit. It's still there a little bit.
I don't know that it's explicit enough. And then what happens next is like, so we see him grow up a little bit. And what Michael Caine says about it is like, Christmas was a time to get extra work done, but it almost sounds like that's his attitude. Like it's not like anyone was explicitly telling him that.
No, what we get here is that he's trying to convince himself that he did made the right choices, or that the choices he made in his circumstances were good,
or the choices that were made for him,
right? Or
we're never really told whether or not that's the case. So, like, if this is the only version of this story you ever experienced, I feel like it's this gap of like, why, who's leaving him here and why, and not that the novella really gives us that explicitly either, but we at least get like. Because his sister's not in this at all.
No.
Right? She's not in it at all. So we don't know anything about his father. Like, the daddy issues are not there. So the only figure that's like telling him to stay here and work hard and do this is the school teacher, right? The schoolmaster, who's Sam the Eagle, which is a great casting.
But before I'm sorry, we're going over one of my favorite Michael Caine moments. Like, this is like, I'm always alone when he says that, and when he's like, and he just I think he really breaks down looking at his younger self. He really breaks down as much as some stuff in the school's about to break down because all right, finishing with Scrooge though for a second, it hits him hard looking at his younger self, and then the montage that comes afterwards because we see all the Christmases go through real quickly, and watching this with Scrooge is Rizzo and Gonzo sitting on the shelf with all these busts of the great writers of history. And it pans over.
It's Aristotle, Dante, Moliere, Shakespeare, and then Gonzo, who is Charles Dickens, who would be the next person in that line. My English teacher, me, had like a giddy little moment over that.
So that's where they are. And then as we travel through time, we get to Sam the Eagle on Scrooge's day for his apprenticeship.
Yeah. Sam the Eagle espousing the Protestant work ethic.
This is in a weird way very accurate.
Yeah.
The history of and he mentions it is the American way. Actually, it's the British way.
I love Gonzo has to like break the fourth wall to come into the store and be like, "Hey, Sam, this is in Britain."
Right. But before that, this school, which is sturdy and has stood the test of time or whatever,
the shelf breaks down and they're like trying to like get out from under the statues.
It's great. It's like this is a boring part of the movie for kids.
Oh yeah.
So what Gonzo and Rizzo have to do, and Sam the Eagle by extension, they have to make it interesting for kids. But again, they're balancing doing it in a way that is not offensive, like inappropriate with the material they have.
It's right on the line. It's right on the fence of stepping over into that Skinflint and Gabriel territory where you're like, do I have to watch these antics anymore? And Gonzo and Rizzo, I think, because they are more critical to the story and the joke of them getting into these shenanigans while trying to tell the story is like woven throughout. It works in a way that the two mice in the animated one doesn't work.
And also, what's better is just better sometimes. They're funnier. They have better jokes. They have better reason to be there.
It's better slapstick, and it's not bad animation where it's unclear what's happening.
And we trust Gonzo, and Rizzo is really proving himself to be a Muppet of merit here, right? Like, he's really going to be somebody that you would want to see in other Muppet projects moving forward. Like this, like you said, this is not his first thing, but this is his biggest thing at this point, and he's come to play. And so they're quality performers, quality Muppets, and what they have here is miles beyond what the other mice had.
Yeah.
I think that's, again, another reason why it works.
Yeah. I really like this movie. Like, I'm not trying to be like the naysayer here, but for me, this is like, it's the Scrooge character in the heart of this that I struggle with, because Sam the Eagle is presented here. If you just take this on its own without any other influences, he is presented as like the guy that gives Scrooge his attitude about the world. So his whole thing is like, work hard and be responsible. And like, he has a cut song here called Chairman of the Board, which is not a good song, which is, I think, why it's cut. That is about like, if you work hard and keep your nose to the grindstone, eventually you can be like rich and influential. And it's like, that's not like a trauma. That's just someone giving you like kind of bad life advice, but that's not a thing that turns you into a guy who's like hurling Christmas wreaths and all this stuff. And I guess you could argue that that's Belle, right? Like, they position it kind of as like he's too much of a hard worker and he's too focused on making money, so he's going to break up with Belle and then that wrecks him forever. But I think I just miss like the layers like that you get. But then again, really with Scrooge McDuck, like Scrooge McDuck worked perfectly well and there was none of that stuff. So who am I to say?
I will say this. There is one bit of dialogue there that is at the end of this scene as the man that's young Scrooge, who, by the way, is one, I will give you this, is one of the weakest young Scrooges ever. They
he's like way too young. It's not good.
Yes, headmaster. His voice must have been horrible, so they came in and somebody did ADR. Or
he just seems like a perfectly nice kid. Like, you don't get the sense that he's going to grow up to be this like monster.
Oh, I mean, he would have been a fine, whatever. But here he sucks. So, like, I'm sorry, he does not add anything to this, and he's actually very noticeably not doing his best. Well, he might be doing his best, but it's just not great. There's a line, though, as the apprentice comes to take the kid away. Sam the Eagle says, "No, here's a more piece of advice here. Never tip."
Oh, yeah.
and I typed, "Is that the greatest lesson? Is that
So
the greatest lesson he took away from Sam the Eagle? Hey, never tip anybody. Never tip them. Keep all your money." And like, I kind of am upset that the chairman of the board song wouldn't be like, look, if it was cut because it didn't add anything, great.
It doesn't. It's not a good song. The Charity Collectors also have a song that's not very good.
Nah, that's just trying to get on Broadway at this point. All you got to do here is, if you're going to do a song, you do The Dark Side Capitalism by Sam the Eagle. Like, you really, like, if that's where you're gonna get him getting the worst lesson of capitalism, this is where you get it. And I think that would be great. I think Sam would be, of course, an appropriate character to deliver that to Scrooge. And also, it would give you more of what you're looking for here, John, in this version.
Yeah, I just think that I need some reason for Scrooge to, like, from his childhood, have a broken view of the world, like a trauma. And aside from the lonely Christmas thing, they don't give me a good enough explanation for why that's happening for me to be like, this is a trauma. I think I end up having to read too much into it from my own knowledge of the story to make it work. And that's what I find hard to manage.
But fair enough, but I feel that he's so hard in the beginning of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
He is so evil in the beginning of the movie that I think that's enough of a setup for the audience. Like, I think in that respect, like, the audience knows why this guy's lonely, because he has pushed people away, or because of his circumstances had people pushed away.
Right, but that's pushing people away is a behavior. It's not a cause. You know what I mean? Like, I need to know the reason why he's pushing people away, because that's the thing that makes you sympathize with Scrooge. If Scrooge is a huge monster at the beginning, and then it never tells you like the thing that was done to him that turned him into that monster, then it's harder to sympathize with him. But then what happens is you just make him really nice for the rest of the movie, because that's what they do with Michael Caine in this movie. He's just kind of like, he softens up real quick and you feel bad for him because he displays a lot of emotion, rather than the story explicitly giving me a reason to care about him.
I hear what you're saying. But I think what's happening here, though, let me get this together, because we're going to bat on this one. Okay, we're really. I think with Scrooge, I really do feel that for me as a kid,
mm-hmm.
and as an adult, and I know that's hard to separate the two things, that montage has a lot of weight. That scene transition of seeing him by himself at Christmas has a lot of weight to why this character just hates the holidays and has a narrow view of the world, right?
Yeah.
Again, is it the best setup for Scrooge ever? No, but for me as a kid, it's told me like, oh, this kid just had nobody should go through that,
Mm-hmm.
And it's a simple and it's a clean version of it, but I still think it works.
Yeah. I think you give me, what would change my opinion on this is literally like one line, right? The spirit says something about like him being alone at Christmas, and he, like, instead of it being like Christmas was a time to like work hard and study more or whatever, like have him throw in a line like, my father thought that Christmas would be a good time for me to do, like, just throw that in and all of my problems with this are solved. I think not having it be explicitly like, tell me that someone is putting him in this position, he's trying to justify it for himself.
But, and again, this is maybe me just because I'm such a fanboy for A Christmas Carol thinking this. I think those are his father's words.
Sure.
I think that's...
I think you're totally right. I just think if looking at this as a single piece of art, it's not there, and I feel the weight of that missing element of the someone hurt this kid, right? Because it kind of feels like he's just hurting himself, and I don't understand why.
But no, I see it as he is being hurt, and that he is and every crossfade is him being hurt over and over and over again.
Yeah, totally. Yes.
Okay. We've done it.
Yeah.
All right, we're good. Let's move on.
Solved. So we get
how is it this one is the one we have the most differing opinions on?
I think I came into this one just like everyone says this is the best version, and as a person who's now a self-appointed Christmas Carol expert, I'm choosing to like hold people to that. Like, okay, you're going to tell me this is the best version of A Christmas Carol. Let's talk about all the reasons why it might not. Like, I'm not even doing it out of a sense of I think this is a bad version, because I think it's a like very good, possibly top 5 version. But I think that it gets accolades because people grew up watching it and it's the Muppets, and that wallpapers over a lot of the flaws that it has.
And I agree with you to a point that, I agree with you that nostalgia can do that to people. Yes. But what I think is it's when people start to try to make... Look, there's this thing called The Spirit of Christmas by Bell Telephone. It's this minuet, like Thunderbird special that comes on. It's like... It's got the greatest story. It's got like The First Christmas and then 'Twas the Night Before. And it's like these horrible like puppets doing this stuff. I watched it one night when I was like 8 years old on Christmas Eve on PBS. And like, I loved it. But like, I can acknowledge that is not a great, like, that's the best special ever. It just, that is nostalgia. I find it quaint. It's kind, it's that.
Sure.
This, I think, while it is not, again, like I said earlier, it's not the novella. It's not that. What it's attempting to do, it's doing amazingly.
And I think you and I will agree on that. Like, I think that's the point we're going to come down on. My issue is I see people being like, unironically saying the Muppet Christmas Carol is the definitive film version of A Christmas Carol. No. No. This podcast has to be like a testament to why that's just an untrue statement.
We'll talk.
So what is definitive is that the next casting choice is such a layup. It's so good because we're going to go to Fozzie
Yes.
Right? And it's just like a little, for a character as big as Fozzie, it's a very small little moment for him. But I guess once you see the names, it's like casting Scrooge McDuck as Ebenezer Scrooge. Like, it's right there. You kind of have to do it. And personality-wise, it fits too.
Side note, can we get Fozzie and Scrooge McDuck to interact a little bit sometime in the future?
Yeah.
Like, that writes itself.
Dynamite. Yeah.
But it's great. We get this party. It's a great version of the party.
Mm-hmm.
Like
at Fozzie's Rubber Chicken Factory.
Like, amazing.
I love that Mrs. Fezziwig is his mom too. Right, because I assume she's a character. I'm not, I guess, as familiar with some of the Muppet stuff as I could be, but I feel like Fozzie's mom made an appearance on the Muppet Show at some point.
She's a recurring character. She's bigger than some Muppets in the background. Like, she has her moments here and there and some stories and such. So if you know about Fozzie's mom, it's a great little moment. Yeah.
We also get a young Statler and Waldorf at this party, which is fun, right?
I love how bad they look as young men.
Yeah, they just look old
because it looks like
they look like old guys with hair dye.
They look like which Scrooge played his younger self and it did not work at all. It's one of the ones we like.
Seymour Hicks.
Seymour Hicks. It looks like Seymour Hicks.
That, yeah.
And it's like it looks like the painted on hair, like they dyed, like, which is such if that's what they were going for.
Oh, 100% it is, because I think they're so briefly you want it to be recognizable.
Right.
So, like, those are old men. Those puppets like exist outside. They're like the wizards in Lord of the Rings. They exist outside of time.
No, I think it was them talking about old Hollywood. Like, this is if we were shooting this and these were actors, we couldn't de-age them, so we just put them in crappy wigs. And it's like, oh.
Yeah, if that's the meta narrative there, it's very good. But it's funny either way because they're heckling Fozzie, which.
Right.
And that's, I think, where like the alchemy of the casting choices like comes together is in moments like that where like you can do A Christmas Carol but still have it explicitly be like the Muppet dynamics, right? And there's a lot of that's going to come up in like the latter half of this as well.
Yeah. Oh, we're just getting going. Like, this is great.
Yeah. We also get Animal and the Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem here are like the band at the party, which is great.
Animal, who's at this moment, I think, at his peak as well in like the popularity. Like this is Animal. Like Amio gets a sizable cameo and joke in this movie. Like he gets this moment right here where he gets the crowd quiet for the speech, and then when he takes us from 1840s, Christmas party folk music to ragtime.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah, he's just mad because he didn't get to play the Ghost of Christmas Future, which is almost what happened.
No.
It was going to be either Animal or Gonzo before they decided that Gonzo was going to be Charles Dickens.
Again, this is why you workshop things, people. Don't work.
Because what they end up doing is so much more effective.
Well, right. Again, the supernatural are something different. You know? They are... And especially...
Can you imagine Michael Caine looking Animal in the face and being like, I fear you more than any specter I've seen? And just being Animal going like, I mean, in a way, Animal's terrifying. Like, Animal's the scariest Muppet, just in a vacuum.
If you're going to do that, then you cast the big...
Sweetums?
Sweetums, who's like... But he's too sweet and cuddly, even though he is big and scary. Like, and you don't do the Phantom, like that guy, like the one who's like maniacal laugh. Like, no, what they did here, spoilers, they create 3 unique ghosts because they have to make them different and feel supernatural for Scrooge to have the reaction he has.
Yeah, totally. So we get a couple good things here. We get Fozzie having to tell young Scrooge to like loosen up and enjoy the party and stop worrying about the money, right? And Scrooge is explicitly like, this party is really expensive, right, young Scrooge? And Fozzie's like, chill, bruh, it's fine. And then he introduces him to Belle here. So we get that, again, Belle and Scrooge meet at the party, which isn't in the novella, but is in like 12 different versions of A Christmas Carol, because it just kind of works, right? Like, I think narratively it's very satisfying.
It's a good transition. She's a member. She's a friend of the family, as they say. I kind of wish there would have been a place here for a beat for them to like if she's a friend of the family, maybe she makes like a bad joke or a whoopee cushion joke. But then again, maybe that's wrong because you got to keep the humans more serious.
You got to play that straight.
Nowadays they do that. Nowadays they would do that, and it would be wrong. This was the right choice.
Yeah.
They meet at the party, and Caine.
Oh yeah.
Oh boy, he sees Belle, and he is taken aback. Like he's taken back.
Yeah, for the 4th or 5th time since seeing Jacob Marley, he gets like teary-eyed, which is his go-to move in this movie. Like he really is good at bringing that like the raw emotion in these moments.
He wasn't the only one, because John, when we transitioned to the next scene, I paused my copy on Disney Plus and went to the internet to watch the VHS copy version.
Oh yeah.
To watch what happens next.
Yeah, so I did not do that, but we can still talk about it, right?
Oh, for once I have the deleted scene, not you, sir.
So the breakup scene is on a really beautiful set. It's like in kind of like a country road in the snow. There's a nice like little model village out behind it that you can see, right? Because it's obviously on an indoor set, but like really nicely done and put together.
Old school Hollywood feels like like Wizard of Oz. Like it just has, but because we know what the scene is or what the scene becomes, if you don't know what's happening, it really makes it like feel like eerie and like it like unnatural, and like it hurts a little bit more because it's on a picturesque it's on this like perfect it's this perfect setting that's going to hit Scrooge right over the head with a punch.
The song that is cut here for their breakup is When Love Is Gone, right? So tell us the story of this, because I feel like you know more about this than I do.
Okay, so back in 1991, 92, when they were making this movie, and they filmed this song, When Love Is Gone, to be in the movie. And the song Love Is Gone is the breakup song. It is slower than the other songs in the movie. It has no Muppets really in it at all. In fact, there are no Muppets. The only Muppets you see are at the very end of it as Belle's walking away from singing it. And it's sad. It's not the best song. It repeats a few verses too many times, but it's a very like, it hits hard. There's a moment where they come to a bridge and Bella's singing about love and having it and how great it was and how it can go sometimes. And Scrooge walks away. Young Scrooge walks away. So young Scrooge is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And older Scrooge comes in and finishes the last verse with Belle. And they sing a one-sided duet from Belle's point of view. But they're singing together and he can't quite do it, but he's breaking down as he's looking at her and remembering her. And they sing the end of the song together. And then she walks off the bridge and walks past Rizzo and Gonzo, which is when the movie picks back up. This scene was cut because a producer at the time felt that it was too slow and kids wouldn't like it and it didn't fit the movie. So they cut it out of the theatrical release. But what happened was, I don't know if they were already in production or what, but the VHS release of this movie had the scene in it. So when I grew up, I didn't know that there was a version of A Muppet's Christmas Carol that didn't have this song in it. This was always a part of it to me.
Yeah.
Then what happened was, because the theatrical release did not have it included, the DVD release didn't have it included. Nothing else did, because they took the film negatives.
Yeah, the Disney Plus one doesn't have it.
The Disney Plus one doesn't have it because the film negatives that were distributed across, they just didn't have it in there. And they thought they had lost it. A couple of years ago, I believe it was Jim Henson's son, found a copy of the movie with this scene still intact. So what I believe is happening now, though nothing has been made official, is that they are restoring it and they'll probably put it on Disney Plus eventually as either an option or another version you can all watch. Like, you can either pick at the beginning which one you watch, or you have to seek it out, but you'll find it on there.
Yeah.
So this song is not the best song. It's a good song, but it is a song that is needed here.
Yeah, I would say my experience is it definitely feels lacking, because I watched this for the VHS growing up that had the song in it, right? I've seen it. I know what it is. And watching it now as an adult, I'm like, yeah, this definitely needs something there. This needs more impact for me for if this is going to be the thing that really is breaking Scrooge, I need it to hit harder, right? And it definitely doesn't. As a kid, I definitely was like, this song is long and boring. I want to get back to the Muppets having fun, right? That was the thing, right? So that executive was not wrong, but maybe being too executive. Like, artistically, it needs to be there, even if the kids can suck it up for 2 minutes and listen to the song.
And here's the thing. As a kid, I can clearly remember this as a kid. Yes, it was boring up until when Caine starts singing.
Mm-hmm.
And when Caine started singing as a kid, the weight of what was going on hit.
Yeah.
So it does its job. You have to go through some repetitive lyrics and a song that is kind of slow and one person singing in the middle of Muppet action going on. But you need this. You need to take your medicine.
I'm wondering if I would feel more charitable to this if I had done what you did and like actually gone. I wanted to just kind of see it as it was so we could sort of compare.
I get that.
Interesting.
I get that, but I gotta tell you, it really lacks without this.
Yeah.
And it connects with something later on in the movie that this sets up. So if it's not there, then even the very end of the movie doesn't have as much weight without this song being in the film.
Oh, pray withered sail those ships all three on Christmas Day, on Christmas Day. Oh, pray withered sail those ships all three on Christmas Day in the morning.
All right. And that does kind of bring us to the end of the Ghost of Christmas Past.
Wow.
That kind of brings us up to the current moment.
We talked a lot about this movie already, man. This is I could talk about this. Look, we didn't even hit my notes that much. Okay, let me go back to them real quick, because you know how much people want us to talk about this one, right? So let's talk about some things that we didn't even bring up for a second there. First of all, the cat that chased Rizzo around at Scrooge's school. great cat. Looks like the puppet from Too Many Cooks, but great cat, right? We've got when Scrooge is lowering into the school, there's this great like arm adjustment when like it's more like he's Mary Poppins, y'all, and it looks great, like when he's holding the hand of the spirit.
So, John, do you want to cast some carols?
Let's cast some carols.
So, here's what we have ahead of us. So, I actually want to take a moment here to talk a little bit about the future of this show.
Oh boy!
Because I'm realizing that it might be an appropriate time for us to bring this up, given that we have several characters ahead of us. So, this show has always been sort of a something that we knew had a limited shelf life, just by the nature of we're talking about the same story every single week. It's not always going to be something that's easy for us to find nuanced and new ways to talk about. And eventually we're going to start retreading things a whole bunch. And so bearing that in mind, James and I always kind of had a soft end date for what we're going to call season 1, considered around the end of either this year or next year. We weren't sure how long it was going to go. And here's what we've decided. So the Muppet Christmas Carol is going to be the final adaptation that we review as part of what we're calling season 1, which is basically has been this year. We started kind of around the beginning of the year, and we've made it through to this point with gaps in between, trying to review as many different adaptations as we could. Conscious of the fact that there are dozens, if not hundreds more adaptations that we have not seen that equally deserve kind of a conversation.
Every year there'll be a new one made, so we're never going to run out of versions of A Christmas Carol. We could do this to our dying day till we're in the dirt with Marley, and we would not get through every single version.
Precisely. And so rather than try to push through and give you a sort of obligatory episode every week and burn ourselves out, what we're going to be doing is putting Jacob Marley is Dead to rest for a time. So in the future, we will continue to do the show, but we're going to be doing it on more of a specialty basis where, around obviously the holiday season, we'll come back to it and we'll review 2 or 3 episodes. I also thought, James, and you can tell me what you think about this idea of doing like a Christmas in July, where maybe we pick like a strange or unusual adaptation and do one to kind of keep the spirit alive at that point in the year.
I think that balances out very well. You get twice a year, there will be a period when we come back with a couple of episodes, different seasons, and look, we know that there are versions that people want. John may scoff, but I know there are a lot of people out there that love the Jim Carrey version. Sure. I know there are people out there that want us to review me personally, I want to review some of the more weird stuff. Like there's one version on Lifetime about like a fashion designer that I really want to review. John, we are reviewing that version.
Oh yeah, I know which one you're talking about. 100%.
Yeah, like it's
so. So basically, what we before we get into casting carols, we wanted to say that what we're going to be doing is this is going to be our final episode of casting carols, where we try to like push through the characters that remain on our list, because we're going to be kind of wrapping up here. This is going to be the last episode of our first season. Now, that being said, this is not going to be the end of our endeavors as podcasters, because we really enjoy this. It's been a great way for us to stay connected throughout the pandemic. We basically have an entire friendship that's built around talking about and breaking down media in this way. So I'm not going to announce exactly what we're doing just yet, but James and I in the new year have in the pipeline a project that we are very excited about podcasting wise, which I will talk about in our next episode. But stay tuned for that, because if you enjoy kind of our dynamic and you enjoy the way that we discuss and break things down in terms of looking at media, this is going to be a continuation, I would say, of like the flavor of conversation of Jacob Marley is Dead, but we're going to be looking at a new piece of content.
And I think another part is with this previous series of gaps we've had recently, and I think it created a natural feel about if we do create more gaps between us and the novella and these adaptations, I think we are going to appreciate them more and come to it with fresher eyes. But we still are pretty experienced at this point of watching it, but we're not weighed down with doing it every other week. We're watching another version. We can come to it with maybe a more honest take, because that way we're not bringing any other baggage to it, right? Like,
exactly.
So exactly. I think we're going to be getting better episodes of Jacob Marley is Dead out of this because of it. And I also think with what we're working on in the future, for the friends out there who listen to this, and you're my friend right now if you're listening to this podcast, all right? Because you're going to leave, you know what you're going to do, leave 5 of what in a few minutes at the end of this. But anyway, you're my friend. But look, to everybody that listens, seriously, if you enjoy this, banter that we have, we're cooking on something big here, and something that I've wanted to do some version of for a long time. And John is we're really looking forward to this next thing.
Yeah,
right?
it's very exciting, and we're both, I think, a little sad to be putting Jacob Marley is Dead back in his grave for a little while, but like Jacob Marley, he'll be making some special appearances.
Look, it's rest in peace, okay? Let's give the man some peace.
Yeah. So we have to do some casting carols. So, James.
Yes.
Here's who we have left. We have Mrs. Cratchit, we have Belle, and we have Fred and his wife. Okay, these are the major players that we have yet to cast. So
all right, so those are the 4 we have left.
We have Belle, we have Fred and Fred's wife, and we have Mrs. Cratchit.
All right, well, we'll be back in a second with who do we want to end with? Should we
Let's end with Belle.
Yeah, let's end with Belle.
We started with Scrooge. We'll end with Belle. Actually, we started with Jacob Marley, I should say. All right. After a ton of brain work and deliberation, I think we have this wrapped up. So,
I don't want to go to school.
we're gonna start off with Mrs. Cratchit.
Yep. We will.
So, for my Mrs. Cratchit, one of my all-time favorite actresses, who I think can bring the exact right energy, I'm going to be casting Laura Linney.
Ooh, yeah, she was in my wheelhouse too. I was thinking about Laura Linney a little bit.
Yeah, I'm thinking like her role as Abigail Adams in the John Adams HBO. Just what a dynamite, and I think she plays that like kind of like overstressed, harangued like housewife type of role in a period piece really well.
I almost cast her as my Belle to be opposite my Paul Giamatti as Scrooge.
Oh, yeah. Gotcha.
I didn't do it. Yeah. I didn't do it. We'll get to that in a minute. You need to go
with like a really young Laura Linney.
Laura Dern we're going to talk about that in a minute.
In the back of my mind.
Well, I'm sorry, what?
I also had Laura Dern in the back of my mind, but I settled on Laura Linney. I just think her feel was more what I'm looking for.
Oh, some of the internet just got mad. We don't care. Alrighty. That's pretty good there, John. That's pretty good.
Who's your Mrs. Cratchit going to be, James?
Well, for those listeners who remember, I'm doing a more of a comedy tint with mine, and I had Martin Freeman playing my Mr. Cratchit. And he's pretty comedic and pretty funny, but he brings there somebody who I feel like could match him. Maya Rudolph.
Oh, that's very good. I like that a lot. That's a very good casting choice.
Maya Rudolph in a slight comedy twist to it, like she would own.
Totally, I love that.
She is kind of like Mrs. Piggy a little bit, like her energy, and that's what I love about this version. And we haven't even gotten to her yet. Maya, I think, would bring it here. She could run that household. She could organize it. And this has been in and out of my head for a while, and I keep forgetting it, remembering it. But this is what I've always wanted for this part. I think Maya Rudolph as Mrs. Cratchit would be amazing. She did the mom from A Christmas Story live a couple of years ago, and she pulled that off pretty well. So I'm really looking forward to this happening in my imagination. All right, John. That's pretty good. And John, yours is all right. That's pretty good. We're 1 for 1 here. I feel good for this. We're good.
Yeah. All right. So we got a twofer. We got Fred and Fred's wife, and I'm going to do mine together. Okay. So I waffled back and forth between two people, and I ultimately decided on this one. For my Fred, I'm going to be casting Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Nice.
Right. I feel like against Robert Downey Jr., I feel like that would be a really good choice.
Nice.
The other one I had in my mind was Tom Hiddleston, but I like Joseph Gordon-Levitt a little bit better, I think, for the role. It was kind of a tough call. And then for his wife, so I wanted someone who, this is like really tricky. I wanted someone, I feel like I wanted someone like of color for his wife. Like this is where I wanted to kind of have my like a little bit of progressiveness kind of like flow into my casting choices.
I get you, man.
And I was trying to think of like an actress, like an up and comer, someone who I think could bring like, I feel like Scrooge's niece is like, can be a little bit sharp or can like kind of hold her own in a way. So I landed on Natalie Emmanuel. Ooh. Who she, for people who don't know her, she was featured in Game of Thrones. So she was like the kind of servant character to the Khaleesi, to Daenerys. The one that was in love with Grey Worm, and I don't remember her character's name.
No, but yeah, she was very good in that, and
yeah,
with better material, because by the end of that show,
well,
not great material.
Yeah.
That's not spoilers. That's not the next project, but
no, no, thank you.
But I, in the past couple of days, have gone through bouts of trying to correct the last 4 seasons of Game of Thrones. Like, what could you have done? Like, how would I have done it as a fan? Because I hear about how Wheel of Time ended well, and I get it. But like, but my point stands. Like, they messed that show up. Anyway,
yeah, not great. So, who do you have for Fred and Fred's wife?
All right, well, get ready for a little accidental gimmick here, because this was not planned in my head, but it happened, and it's now a gimmick. Well, you gotta have a youthful relationship here, so what better casting than Spider-Man and Mary Jane, Tom Holland and Emma Stone as Fred and Fred's wife.
I like that.
Right? Like,
how did your surrogate? There's a crossover. Like, I have the surrogate father and you have the surrogate son in that dynamic, right? With Robert Downey Jr.
I just like the way. I guess it's more how I relate to him. Maybe this is a little recency bias with just watching a Muppet. I like Fred being young. I like Fred being really young.
Yeah.
And Tom can do young, but also he's 20 and he can play 20, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And Emma Stone, what she can do is she can really do the party game well. And she can have the same type of energy that I also, spoilers, I like from the Fred's wife in this scene, in this version we're getting up to. Like, I really like I think she could do something similar to that I would like to see here, but also have a certain type of like sincerity with Tom. If Tom gets to have the Fred, I'm always going to try speech, which I think he would do great on. And she could put a hand on his shoulder or a glance from across the room. Like, that's why I love that man. Emma Stone could really knock that out the park. And I think she would be great in that role.
Like it. All right. Well, that leaves us with our final casting, which is Belle. So for Belle, this was tough. I was trying to think of an actress who can like play period really well, who has kind of like a youthfulness and like, again, that up and coming energy. And I wanted it to be someone who's like known, but not super well known just yet. So what I landed with, what I feel good about, is Phoebe Dynevor, who played the lead in Bridgerton, that kind of pseudo period series that was very popular on Netflix earlier this year. And I feel like she's like just the right age, the right look, the right feel for my Belle. So that's what I've decided to go with.
Nice. And so in your mind, is she playing opposite a young Scrooge, or is she playing against a Robert Downey Jr. aged down?
A young Scrooge. That aging down stuff freaks me out. Well, I mean, I could see it too, but like I think either way it would work.
Well, in the magical holodeck that is my casting of A Christmas Carol, get ready, friends, because there's some de-aging that's about to go down because
you have a young Paul Giamatti.
No, I would have a young Paul Giamatti because I want him to act opposite this actor because she's classic. She's royalty. She knows a lot about Belle because she acted opposite Belle when she was Mrs. Potts. Ladies and gentlemen, Angela Lansbury is my Belle.
Young Angela Lansbury. Okay, all right.
If you watch her in some of her comedy
like
hall
National
movies,
Velvet, yeah.
She has such this energy with her as a young woman that I think she could be the type of person that drags out the humanity of Scrooge, and she's only got a few scenes, and so she's going to have to communicate that with subtle but big things. You know, like one after another in like the span of like probably a 5-minute sequence at best.
Yeah.
Who could do that? Angela Lansbury.
I like it. I think that's like a really great kind of capstone for you. So that's our casting carols. Now, there may be ways that we come back to this in future episodes. We'll see how that goes. But we hope you've enjoyed it. We'll guess post lists of like everyone that we came up with over the course of the show to the Twitter feed. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can follow us at Marley is Dead Pod. You can email us at jacobmarleyisdead@gmail.com. Look for Jacob Marley is Dead on Facebook, all the usual places.
Mm-hmm. I want to see a poster of this made. Okay, friends, we'll put the list out there. Let's get some posters of which one would look better. You know, You've seen those Marvel, Star Wars, nobody knows how to make a movie poster anymore things. Do one of those for this.
Face.
Just everybody's face with a Christmas tree behind it or something.
It's Christmas Eve and we got festivities to get to, so we want to thank a few people. We want to thank Milo Newman, obviously, for our amazing cover art that served us well over the course of this year. Want to thank Ben DeVries for our opening, closing, and interstitial music. I'm going to I'll be really sad when I am no longer able to edit that into our podcasts.
Real quick, that has been, I don't know if we'll get a chance to say it again, but what an amazing score for this podcast. Just a natural fit, and I will again really miss that being a part of what we do.
Yeah, totally. And thank you to you listeners who have stuck with us through this whole year. We got one episode left after this, and then we'll be putting us to bed for a while. So James, what can people do if they've enjoyed listening to us so far?
Well, if they've enjoyed listening to this podcast, they could leave a 5-star review wherever they listen to their podcasts. I don't get how the algorithm works. You don't get how the algorithm works. Nobody cares about the algorithm except for those who really care. But you care about us. We care about you. So please leave a 5-star review. It helps us out and helps us spread this podcast to as many listeners as possible. And for those that have done it and written reviews over the lifespan of season 1, thank you.
Yeah, thank you a lot.
We read them.
We do.
We laugh at them. We get the little jokes you're making. And it's like, yeah, that's, again, like, they're talking about you there, John. Oh, they're clearly talking about this jerk right here. So, yeah. Tune in next week. We'll be wrapping up our discussion of A Muppet Christmas Carol. And until then, and as we enter into kind of the end of this holiday season and march towards the new year, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone.
On Christmas Day in the morning.